All
All
right.
right. Good morning, everyone. So we'll go ahead and get started. I've asked Joshua to give us an opening prayer. So we'll start with that first.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for this opportunity to participate in this webinar related to service learning and implementing it in uh, teaching and experiences with students at BYU. And pray that we can receive inspiration and guidance and ideas on how we can apply that into our own opportunities to interact with students in and out of the classroom. And say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for attending the Service Learning at BYU webinar. I'm Ursula Sorensen from the Center for Teaching and Learning, and that was Joshua Holt, another teaching and learning consultant with the CTL. And I'm going to be introducing our speaker, Chris Crippen. Before I do that, Joshua Holt will be watching the chat. If you have any questions, you can put those in the chat, and he'll also be conducting the follow-up questions at the end. So I'll now introduce our speaker, Chris Crippen. He was appointed director of the Center for Service in Learning, YServe, at BYU in 2014. He is originally from Lake Elsinore, California, and has lived in Elkridge, Utah since 2005. He and his wife, Sherelda, have 6 sons and 2 daughters. Chris has spent the first half of his career as a public school teacher and administrator in both California and in Utah. He studied elementary education at both BYU Hawaii and BYU. He graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Elementary Education in 1999, and he continued his studies, earning a Master's of Arts in Education with an emphasis on curriculum and instruction from Azusa Pacific University in 2001, and received his educational administrative licensure from Southern Utah University in 2013. He has coached volleyball for 22 years, and he loves music, sports, the outdoors, and serving others. So I will turn the time over to Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Ursula. I appreciate that. And I realized as you read that, one of my favorite designations now is grandpa. I neglected that on that bio, but that blessing happened to us this year as well. And I can't tell you of a better title. It's amazing. Happy Friday, everyone. Glad you're here with us today. I just want to spend some time with you talking about how you might be able to use service learning in your class and the way we do it at BYU. It's a little different than maybe it might be done at other universities. And how YServe might be of help in that. So taking a look here, I've listed some of the objectives as mentioned. Becoming familiar with what YServe offers, being inspired. I hope that's something that you can take away today. That there's something you can put into your classes. I have even asked some of your colleagues here on campus how they do it. There are a few professors and instructors who've had some success, some of them who are just getting started with it. So you'll hear from them as well today. In fact, we'll start right off the bat with Associate Professor George Pierce. He's a religion instructor and has been using service as a vehicle in his classroom pretty successful.
My name is George Pierce, and I teach in the Department of Ancient Scripture, and I teach classes on Old Testament and on Jesus Christ and the Everlasting Gospel. And then this semester I have a class on the writings of Jeremiah. I've been using service learning in my classroom for about 2 years now, and had great success with it.
Great. And what's been your experience as a faculty member using service learning? Like what's been some of your challenges, or what has been some of the benefits you've noticed?
I think some of the challenges that I noticed first implementing it was making sure that everybody had a project, and without using YServe, people were all over the board. Mm-hmm. And while the projects were good, there was no way to sort of objectively measure what was going on. But one of the benefits has been, especially using YServe, is just the amount of hours and the amount of service that the students have given to the community, to their families, to the church and other organizations, so that we have a way to be able to fulfill the commandment that Christ has given us to serve one another or the urgings of the Old Testament prophets to serve those who are marginalized. And so that's one of the greatest benefits, is to be able to have them do that, and to see them fulfill that aspect of the aims of a BYU education and want to continue to do it. And that's been a really great blessing.
Excellent. And then what have you noticed in your students? Like, what benefits have they had because of serving others?
I think as far as the students are concerned, I have some that are very much into service already, and so for them it's an opportunity to be able to show me that they're already doing this and they continue to do it and they love to do it. And I think one of the biggest benefits is for students who originally are resistant to the idea, and then they get into it, and then in their feedback papers I see that they're very much in love with service and they want to continue to do it. And even if it weren't a class requirement of mine, they'll continue to go through YServe or some other organization to be able to continue to serve. And so to see them bond with that and be able to take that from I'm not really comfortable with service type of idea to I want to continue to do this is just a blessing and a benefit overall for me as a teacher.
Excellent. Any challenges that you've noticed in students with service learning?
I think the biggest challenge is just the initial finding a project and then finding the time to commit to it. But once they do and they get over those two initial sort of obstacles, then I think that they run with it. I think just finding that direction, and that's where I think YServe really helps with that, is to give them direction.
Okay, great. And then finally, any words of wisdom for faculty who want to begin service learning in their classes?
Just include it and do it and embrace it. And be willing to work with students if they come to you halfway through the semester and they don't have something yet, but work with them and just encourage them, and it'll all pay off because, like I said, it's one of those great moments where you can say, see, we helped people, and right, see how it makes you feel better. And once they tie that in with what they're learning religiously and spiritually, then it all works out.
So as you heard, there is some element of management to this as well from the instructors.
My name is George Pierce.
We'll talk about that and how we can kind of surmount some of the obstacles to incorporating service into your coursework. Let's start with a basic definition. And we have this from a book called Learning Through Serving that states that service learning is students engaging in community service activities with intentional academic and learning goals and opportunities for reflection that connect to their academic discipline. So you see now how important it is that the service opportunity is connected somehow to the learning. It really helps for academic purposes to cement that learning in a very engaged way, right? We've heard President Worthen and our administrators talk about incorporating the inspiring learning model here at BYU. And I think this is a perfect example of that in that each participant walks away from, I'm going to even say floats away from some of these volunteer experiences with this feeling of who served whom just now. Each time that they go about this service and this work, despite the fact that it's related to the dreaded homework, right? They actually find that they feel the value and the blessing of the service. Our local CEO of United Way of Utah County, Bill Halterstrom, is a guest speaker in my class, and he always talks about this term mutual reciprocity, in which both parties feel served. And that's what often happens when our students find themselves in opportunities to utilize their spiritual gifts and talents in the service of others, while, as you can see on this definition, connecting to their academic disciplines and furthering their education professionally. So it is a win-win, is what I'm getting at. Let me tell you about what we have here on campus for you, and certainly for all of our students. The Center for Service and Learning is nicknamed YServe here on campus and certainly in the community. And it is comprised of 70 community service programs created and operated by students. We have a program proposal process in which if a student has a great idea, they can bring that to us. We can help them work through the details, and either it's already being done and we can incorporate them into that, or there may be a new program that needs to be created within our center, and it would receive dean approval and a budget, and off it goes if it's deemed worthy that way. So that's kind of what's happened is these programs have been generated by students, which is a beautiful part of this, in that they're already passionate about this idea and they want to make it work. And it's always connected in some way to either their spiritual gifts and talents and or their academic discipline, and they want to get a further experience while an undergrad or graduate student here. I emphasize and graduate. We have a lot of graduate students that also participate in our programming. I will say that all of our programming is for BYU students. That question comes up frequently, and many times they are also rooming with a UVU student or a non-student. But our programming typically is for the BYU student, the matriculated full-time student. Flex GE students can participate, but the leadership experiences and all of those we reserve for the full-time students. Just to add some detail for you. Our largest categories of service tend to be in the education and mentoring spectrum. Lots of opportunity for our students to reach out and build and lift. We do have your typical ideas of service, such as working at the food bank or maybe going out in the community and raking and leaves and that kind of thing. And certainly, there's a program called Community Cleanup just for that. But we also have many that are within very specific niches that I'll talk about today. Some of the community partners you may recognize are Habitat for Humanity, or Boys and Girls Club, Community Action Food Bank, Special Olympics, Best Buddies, that's an international nonprofit. And of course, some of our partnerships with United Way. And beside those, we also have several that are just right here, BYU centric. In fact, today, right as we speak in the Richards building, there's one called Adaptive Aquatics that's taking place, in which students from local school districts, Alpine, Provo, Nebo, who have disabilities, are brought to the Richards building, and they're paired up with BYU volunteers, and they will do one of two things. Those who are prepared to go swimming in the pool, the BYU volunteers will take them in the pool, and they'll have a safe experience playing in the pool and enjoying time together. Those who don't go across the hall to the gym, and we've got lots of really interactive games and things in there for them. But an opportunity for our students to just stop and put the books down for a moment and kind of recenter and focus and seek that kind of balance they're always looking for. So it's a great opportunity right here on campus. And I'm telling you that because that's one that is just made up by a student. They had an idea and I thought that would be a good thing to do. And it has been for years. Adaptive Aquatics. I want to share with you too that we do conduct various surveys. And in the 2018 annual Y-Serve alumni survey, we had a total of 88% of respondents indicate that they are still serving after graduation in some capacity. And this is generally beyond church service, but in addition to out in their communities doing good. And that's what we like to see.
Hey, Chris, there is a question in the chat.
Sure.
Related to opportunities specifically in the public schools.
There certainly are, Paul. Yes, we have a lot of opportunities with the schools, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But yeah, education and mentoring is the largest category, and therefore we have specific programs that go and teach anatomy or health classes to schools. We also have others that are just in the class as a general aid, helping with vocabulary or with basic math facts, et cetera, right? Or whatever the teacher needs help with. So yeah, there certainly are opportunities to work in the schools. And we'll get into more of that soon here. Again, I'll look at some of the categories, working with those with special needs and the elderly populations. And in each of those, our students find new things about themselves as they dig a little deeper into their spiritual gift and talent database, their personal one, right? And then find out how to employ those gifts into a professional work. But again, that mutual reciprocity just really rings true there, because each time the students feel served by those that they're trying to help. Community projects, mentoring, teaching, a lot of teaching opportunities. We have English around the world, teaching English to speakers of other languages, often through via a webcam and beyond borders. the plethora of languages spoken on this campus are employed in a lot of ways to our community. Big events such as Community Outreach Day on Martin Luther King Jr. Day is a fantastic one. That's one program that's open to the entire community, including non-students. But we also have Sports Hero Day or Project Youth, in which we bring students from local school districts onto campus, and they get a college experience and they get to mingle with our BYU athletes. So there's some one-day events. I would also include in that Share Your Hair here in the Wilkinson Center Terrace. We partner with several hairstylists, and they come in and give haircuts to young ladies who wish to donate their hair for medical related hair loss. And so those tend to be those kind of one-day big events that students do a lot of planning for and pull together. And of course, our largest pool of volunteers tends to come from those in the healthcare, pre-healthcare, pre-professional fields. And so we try and connect them to opportunities specific to the healthcare industry. Thank you for that question, Paul. We'll get to that a little deeper. Speaking of education, peer educator YSERV programs that I would love to highlight in this opportunity include tutoring, Seeds of Success, and TOPS. And so I'll go through each of those independently. Tutoring is the only program we have through YSERV where students are serving students. And I would also indicate that this is one where I believe every single BYU student could potentially volunteer. That's thousands, tens of thousands of students. But literally every student has done well in one class or another and can serve to throw a life vest to someone who's not doing well. In fact, I'll show you a slide here real quick. This is a screenshot of one of our tutoring databases in which the students go to tutoring.byu.edu and they enter their net ID, and then it's connected to AIM. It pulls up their class schedule, and they can simply go here and select one of their classes that they're really struggling in. And as they click on that, it'll pull up a list of students who have volunteered to tutor in that class. We have over 500 registered right now. We always need more, clearly, especially for those life science classes and physical science classes, some accounting classes that tend to be popular, math classes. So that is an opportunity for students both to find a tutor, as well as, more importantly in this conversation, be a tutor. And if you're asking your students to do some service, there's a great way. Another way that they can be a tutor is through a different program called Seeds of Success. And in this YSERV program, students from the K-12 community, mostly their parents, right, are saying, wow, my daughter is really struggling in this area. She's in this grade. There's a form they fill out, and we find a volunteer who volunteered to match up and help that student and kind of be the superhero, for the parents and family especially, who tried to reach out and help the student, but that college student comes in and boy, they just say what needs to be said, and suddenly the students get it. So that is a tutoring program for outside of BYU. So tutoring is within, Seeds of Success is outside, or the K-12. And then TOPS is tutor outreach to provost schools. And we've created partnerships with coordinators in each campus that our volunteers can work through to get into the classrooms, as already mentioned, and be able to serve as an aid for academic purposes in schools, both elementary and secondary. So those are ones that I wanted to highlight because I think they can handle the largest amount of numbers and really help everybody have a successful experience in serving in the community. I want to share with you a little bit about Spencer's experience. He's now our executive director over a very unique program that he'll describe called Underwater Robotics.
So I am Spencer Thompson. I'm from Vancouver, Washington. I'm a mechanical engineer. Let's see. I am currently a sophomore at Brigham Young University, and it's been a pretty awesome experience so far.
So tell me a little bit about your experience with service learning.
So, as I've been in BYU, I've wanted to do service related things. And so I was looking at Y-Serve and like trying to kind of get into it, but freshman year I was busy. And so I didn't really ever have like the time to like get into it because like all the assignments. But then in one of my classes, American Heritage actually, they assigned, we had to do 10 hours of community service. I wanted to do like kind of get into Y-Serve originally, but because I had that opportunity where the teacher actually assigned it, I was able to like, it now required that I set aside time instead of like me having to find time myself. I now had to like make the time because of the assignment. And then once I'd made the time, even though I'm now no longer in American Heritage, I'm still the program director for one of those. And yeah, it's been pretty awesome that I've been able to continue in that. Well, so it's always a really nice thing. There's lots of different Y-Serve organizations or service options. The reason I actually chose mine was because it's related to my major, underwater robotics. So we go into schools and help kids kind of make little submarines for a competition at the end of the year. So we don't actively do engineering, but we are kind of mentoring kids through the engineering process. And it's also just a good opportunity to do a little bit of leadership and get that practice. So honestly, it just works tons of skills, and it's pretty beneficial, even if it's not like, even if you're not doing something amazing, it's still, service gives a good benefit, like emotionally and all that. So it's awesome. So
All right. I want to talk a little bit more about this principle that both Dr. Pierce and Spencer talked about in reflection, in the process that it plays. The point that it plays in the process. Columnist Sidney J. Harris said, as you can see, the whole point of education is to turn mirrors into windows. And often when I'm teaching this to students, I like to talk about these guys. These are our mirrors, it seems, these days, and getting self-absorbed and fully distracted by our phones, but also let's just take the concept of mirrors, right? Really kind of reverting everything back to us. College is a me time, and the students certainly do need to look out for number one. But I think in this whole process, they can get entirely absorbed in themselves and really miss out on the whole point of the education. To turn it into windows where we can see the needs around us and meet them with the new skills and acquisition that we have. So when we do any kind of service in class or because of a class, I think it's important that there's always some form of reflection that takes place. And this can be done in a variety of ways. Before I go to Dr. Hawkins, I want to share, I teach Student Development 290, Learning Through Service, easy little student development course, but we really dig into this reflective piece. And I ask the students to come up with ways in a creative way to demonstrate what they've learned. And the beauty is that they all do things differently. There's some that will create a collage, and others will create something out of ceramics, and others will create a dance from Polynesia, and others will make a song on the piano or the harmonica or whatever it is, right? But they're conveying to the class and me a message of what was learned about them and service. And it's always so enriching and beautiful to see them do it in the way that they do it best. There's also a written essay option, because that may be the way that they are able to convey best. But point being that they are reflecting, actively reflecting. We'll talk more about that after we hear from Dr. Hawkins.
I'm Kirk Hawkins, and I teach in the political science department here at Brigham Young University. In that department, I teach a few classes. The one today that I've mentioned is Introduction to Comparative Government, just a 100 level course, usually about 100 students. And one of the new things we've introduced to this class this semester is a service learning requirement. Students will need to spend at least 7 hours this semester serving someone who is not from the United States. And that person could be living here, or they could be in another country. we implemented that for a couple of reasons. I've been thinking about it for a little while. I have experience using a service learning requirement in a class I taught several years ago. And I remember that that requirement in that class had probably the biggest impact on students of anything else we did in there. They would write an essay on it, and you could tell how much they had enjoyed the experience and the kind of impact it had on them. And in a lot of cases, they talked about how they had even done more than the requirement. They were continuing to serve at whatever this place was. And this year in the university conference, Elder Christofferson talked about the importance of helping students look beyond themselves, and their education here should help them learn that it wasn't just about them, and that we should really be taking seriously and helping them understand that motto of going forth to serve. And so I thought we should bring that a service learning requirement into our class this year. It was a different class, and the students had a kind of previous requirement before that hadn't been going really well. It was just a little piece of what they did there, and I thought this would be a good time to try this out. So we brought it in. It's all new. I don't know how it will go yet. At this point, we've only had students asking what counts, what they'll be allowed to do to meet the requirement. But we'll see how it goes. Our hope is that by doing this, students will, first of all, be able to really learn some of that vision that Elder Christofferson was encouraging us to have them learn, that it is about more than just them. So I think the service is good in and of itself. My past experience says that they'll probably go on, and we hope that the students won't stop with what they're doing here, but that they'll continue to find ways to serve outside of what they would normally do as a member of the church, within the church. So we want them to be able to reach out and serve others outside our community. The second thing is that we want them to be able to make better connections with what we're talking about in the class, that being in contact with people from other countries is a way to help them think more about the politics that they're learning about, the governments in other countries, and that they'll be able to see, unfortunately, a lot of people they'll be serving from those countries will be people who've not been helped by their home governments. And that'll be a tough lesson to see that sometimes government doesn't work and that it could be better.
So I appreciate what Dr. Hawkins shared, especially about the reflecting piece and the value of that, and really applying what is learned in the classroom to real life. That's a great advantage of using real life situations in the community, addressing real needs that are out there all around us all the time, and finding these solutions that, let's be honest, may or may not have been discovered yet. Our students are brilliant. They're full of experience already, having been in study abroad and missionary experience, etc. And so they have a lot to offer. And I've found that as I've lent trust to them in these leadership positions to go forth into the community and do good, they have met the needs more than any other volunteer possibly could in certain situations. So there is an element of structure that needs to be there. As Dr. Pierce was alluding to, sometimes there will be a little hiccup, and you got to pull it back together and see what help they need, how you can support, right, and mentor and guide. But ultimately, I've found success in leaving it up to them to find the solutions to the situations that come up. The process of reflection really allows them to find the learning in the service. So again, defining reflection, an intentional process of metacognitively examining an activity for its purpose and meaning. We're thinking about our thinking and why is this happening? What are the results? And what are the benefits? What are the ramifications even of what I'm learning about this to my academic learning, right? What are the ramifications to my future, my personal life? There's a lot that takes place there in the process of reflection, and it just would be remiss if you did not include this component in your educational service learning experience. I want to share with you an example of what worked in a K-12 classroom. This was in a 7th grade English class, but I got to give you some background here because it pertains to BYU. I'm familiar with this circumstance for a few reasons. One is, as the director of YServe, I got to know this student named Caroline back in the day. She was a program director for a program we have called Access. And Access and its sister program Impact, both are programs in which they serve as BYU volunteers serve as big brothers and big sisters to children or youth, respectively, at risk. And so in this case, Caroline was paired up with a male volunteer, and they were reaching out to a little girl who was 4 years old at the time. We're supposed to start them at 5. She was right there. Her name was Hope, ironically. Hope had a horrible home life. Things were really not going well. And Caroline and her partner were to be a source of light and help to this little girl. And that's exactly what they did through making cookies and taking her to the bee museum and just, simple, cheap little experiences. But the mentoring is taking place in every bit of it, right? And the beauty was that Caroline continued to do this through her undergrad. She graduated and she received a job teaching English in Salem Junior High School down in the Nebo District. And that happens to be where my kids were going to school. And so saw her there. She asked me to come do some presentations for her class. She had an idea to incorporate volunteerism and service into her English curriculum. And she used it. This multidisciplinary unit was created using a children's book called The Giver, some of you have probably heard of. And the point of this book is really the society that has no empathy. And it's like, what do we do then? Like, how do we avoid this terrible situation where people just don't care? And that's what she wanted to drive home is what can we do to care in our communities? Beautiful for these 7th graders, right? In this very selfish and very kind of self-absorbed period of life, confused period of life, right? Those middle school years. And so she created in small groups this opportunity for students to dream up a volunteer experience. And all they really had to do was practice their informational writing skills by creating an infographic brochure. So that was the product, that was the assessment. But what was really happening through this, realize, is these students were thinking through what it takes to create a volunteer experience in their community. And indeed, as they went through that process, they started to create real opportunities, not just fake ones that they're making a brochure about, but they started to really pull together the details of what this could look like. And they were able to do some real service in their communities as 7th grade kids. And it was much to the surprise of some of the community members, right? But what a beautiful thing to pull all of that together. The values of empathy and serving others were reinforced. The language arts skills were reinforced. They even had some social science in there and learning about civic engagement, right? She invited guest speakers like myself and others to come and provide knowledge and experience and a foundation. And like I said, these kids actually got so excited about their experiences that they started to pull these out together realistically. Like they actually made them happen. Indeed inspired some additional volunteer experiences that they had not been aware of prior until they had underwent this experience. So I wanted to give you just a look at what a K-12 teacher did to make that work. And you can apply that to your higher ed situations as you will. I've got some ideas. Like I said, and I teach this course here. And for years we've taught the principles, sure, in class, but we've tried to provide opportunities to make it real. When I first started teaching the class, and obviously a class on service, you should expect some service, right? But it wasn't required. And I decided to make it a requirement that the students do at least 10 hours of service in a semester. I even held to that in the spring term. It's still 10 hours. So it's a little more intensive during the spring term that I teach. But in each of the 2 sections per semester that I teach this course, they easily are able to pull that together because it works out to less than an hour a week. And they're able to serve in a variety of ways. Certainly we direct them to YServe as a resource. We have 70 programs, that's very easy. They're geared for this experience. But I also talk to them about other resources such as justserve.org. Hopefully you have a familiarity with that, each of you. I would invite you to get registered on justserve.org. And the website has the ability to geolocate opportunities near you within the radius you select. And so it's just a fantastic resource for vetted, meaningful service opportunities and bringing communities together. So definitely get familiar with justserve.org. Also United Way, which is kind of like a YServe for the community, right? A brokerage of service is kind of what I like to call it. But there's plenty of opportunity and certainly need to give of your time and your talent in the service of others. So a couple of great resources handy to you right there. A fourth one, I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention, is getting down on your knees and just praying for those opportunities. Whether you as the professor and being guided in that, or certainly asking your students to do the same and allowing the Holy Spirit to guide them and become instruments in the Lord's hands. That's a beautiful experience for all involved. The unstructured service can sometimes be the most meaningful because you're acting on the errand of the Lord at that moment. If there's a familiarity with an NGO or a non-governmental agency or a nonprofit in your field of interest, it might be good to reach out to them directly and just see what you can offer. What connection can you make with them? That would be your obligation and prerogative to kind of look deeper and see, what do we have in this valley? I focus on valley because it's nice to be face to face and be able to serve that way. But there's even things beyond our valley that you could connect with and serve in a virtual manner. We learned that through COVID in our office. But there are things that you can do that are specific to your area of interest that could be very helpful for both the students and those you serve. So wanted to just review those resources. As an instructor, as an educator, we ought to find opportunities for our students to dig a little deeper, right? My midterm exam for this course is actually very hands-on. They are doing service as part of the assessment, right? And they're applying the things they've already learned. See what you can do to make your assessments as authentic as possible. Incorporating reflection papers and activities along the way. Inviting guest speakers who are specialists can help you. We do a little game called Share Your Assets that teaches these principles that I'm talking about in my class. And what I'm including with this is the fact that games and simulations and those kinds of things are still engaging for higher education students as well as they were for elementary and secondary students. So don't stray away from those. In fact, one of the things that I do, elementary ed guy, I graduated in elementary ed here at BYU, taught for 12 years. And so when I teach my college course, on the first day I pull out Play-Doh and they're creating their initial philosophy of service out of Play-Doh. That's where we start. And they love it. It's kind of a fun nuance, but they love to do something that they did in kindergarten, even in their freshman year of college. So we end the course with a creative presentation on philosophy of service. So what they made in Play-Doh is kind of the pre-assessment. The creative presentation at the end is what I was speaking to earlier. Maybe it's this beautiful collage or painting or video or whatever they chose to create to convey their new meaning, their new learning on how they will serve. See how you can apply that to your curriculum, your academic area. See whatever partnerships you can form. And I'll just share with you at the bottom here, I have a couple reflection activities you may have heard of. Rosebud and Thorn is a pretty popular one where that's your structure. That kind of provides a structure to the conversation. But each person thinks of a rose, a beautiful thing about the concept or the experience they just had. What was beautiful to them? A bud would connote that idea of, I'm just beginning to understand. I'm beginning to learn about this thing. And then the thorn would be something that's still kind of prickling. So you're not quite content with it yet. It's bothering you, right? It's irritating. I want to know more about this. Or I don't like it. There's something I just really don't like about it. So that rosebud thorn format can kind of provide a structure for a conversation in small groups. Another fun one is to divide your class into small groups by numbers 1, 2, and 3, and then put them in their groups where there's a 1, 2, and 3 in each group. And you do a wagon wheel. So you ask a question, and in small groups, they're reflecting on that question and sharing their insights and their learnings. And then after a certain amount of time, the ones rotate clockwise, the twos rotate counterclockwise, and three stay put. And you get this speed dating thing going on where everybody gets to mingle and maybe ask the same question again, you know, and rehash it a little deeper. Or maybe you have another reflection question that you continue the process with. But I just wanted to share with you some things you can put into your work in your classroom right away in the reflection process. Can I also harp on the fact that we have a great resource in BYU TV? I hope you've watched some of these programs. Turning Point is a documentary style discussion of people who've made a difference and what was it that got them there. Making Good, similar thing where Kirby Hayborn goes in and really digs deep into a volunteer organization. And then you kind of see the lessons along the way. And he always shares a song with the group. The Fixers, they go and help these nonprofits all over the world that just need a little sprucing up of their facility or something like that. But there's always a deep story and meaning involved in the service that they do. Same with Welcome Home. They provide some charitable resources for decorating homes for those who were otherwise homeless. And it's a beautiful story to watch that happen. Random Acts has been filmed right here on campus multiple times. And they're just goofy and fun, but they also have a really deep, meaningful story about the service that they do. Each of these programs serves to me as a resource of inspiration, of ideas for how I can incorporate service into the lives of the students we touch and teach. So I wanted to spend some time and just kind of inspire you that way. They're all accessible via the website. Some of these are actively on the air today. Check them out. Very heartwarming, good inspiration. I'm going to wrap up here with Dr. Casey Griffith's comments. He has been involving it for several years now, and just want you to hear his experiences as well.
I'm Casey Paul Griffiths. I'm a professor of church history and doctrine here at Brigham Young University. I teach classes related to church history and related to families, and I've been engaged in service-based learning for several years.
So how long have you been using service learning in your classes?
I've been using service learning since probably about 2017, when I had lunch with the director of the Center for Student Service here at BYU.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the lunch, I was convinced that I needed to include some kind of component of service in my classes.
Excellent. So what has been the biggest strengths that you've noticed since incorporating it?
We do a lot of good in the community. So I teach large sections of BYU. I'm a teaching track professor. I have about 1,400 students a semester. A lot of them choose to do a service project for their enrichment papers. And they've done everything from, go to an old folks home to clean up a vacant lot. Because I teach religion classes, service and being service oriented is one of the outcomes we need, regardless of whether or not it's a church history class or a family class or an ancient scripture class. And so this is a great way for them to see that the gospel not only gets them to church on Sunday, but can make their communities and their lives better as they learn to serve.
Great. And have you noticed any challenges that you've had?
Challenges linked to service, not a lot. I mean, it's almost all been entirely positive. Now, it's sometimes a challenge for them to organize it. Like, it's one of those things that usually turns into a little bit more work because the average college student is trying to do as little work as possible. And I completely understand that. But at the same time, overwhelmingly positive. It makes them able to organize, bring friends together, and just look outside themselves, which can sometimes be hard to do.
Excellent. And what other benefits have you noticed in your students that have been using service learning?
I've noticed a lot more community engagement, a lot more engagement with their peers, because usually in order to meet the hours required for the project, they have to recruit 3 or 4 other people to help out. And those are all positive things. We're training these young people for service in the church, and organizing a service project as a college student is like doing an internship to one day be a Relief Society president or an Elder Corps president, where a large part of what they're going to do is service.
Excellent. And any final thoughts for a faculty member who's thinking about using service learning in their classes?
I would say engage with the center. They have all kinds of service opportunities. Justserve.org is really, really great. But don't be afraid to, allow your students a little leeway to search out and find service projects. Because they usually come back with really, really great things. And I've learned not to be too prescriptive, because a lot of times my students will have a lot better ideas and opportunities on their radar than I have on mine.
I especially appreciate what Casey ended with there, in just the point of not being too prescriptive, but being able to be open to the ideas they come up with and find ways to clear the way so that they can have success. One thing I want to mention too before I close up is how critical it is to use the Office of Risk Management. That's what I found has really helped, because there are some risks. You couldn't just send your students out into the downtown Provo or Salt Lake and mingle with the homeless without some kind of instruction and preparation, et cetera, right? And Lisa Mortensen is one I love to refer to in the Office of Risk Management for questions I have as far as vetting programs and making sure that this is within the scope of something a BYU student should be involved in. So I've got my contact here. If you'd be interested in talking more, I would absolutely love to. Our office is 2330 Wilkinson Student Center, right here in the center of near the terrace of the Wilkinson Center second floor. And we'd love to help you out. Come talk to our office assistants or myself any old time. I'm going to leave a little bit of time, Ursula, if we could, or Josh, to just answer any questions if there are any.
Yeah, we appreciate Chris's preparation and the presentation. It was really informative. If anyone has a question, feel free to just unmute your mic. You can go ahead and speak questions. If you're more comfortable doing it in the chat, we can field questions through the chat as well.
I have a question. So if there is another organization that I think has a project that would align with something I'm doing in a course that we could use for service learning here at BYU, do I need to go through some sort of line to vet whether I can use that company and that project to incorporate into my service learning for my course?
Yeah, let me answer that two ways. One, if you want to do it through YServe, we would help go through that process with legal, with risk management, et cetera, and work it through. If you want to just set this up for your class specifically, then I would certainly invite you to talk to Lisa Mortensen, start there, and maybe the legal representative from your department. That's kind of the process that I go through, just to make sure that we're set and in a good place, not crossing any lines we shouldn't, or even getting counsel on what would be some things to consider that I might not have. Your upline obviously would be one to discuss those things through as well. But if it's the YServe program, like I mentioned, we have a program proposal form that the students, when they have an idea, fill out, and it helps them to kind of walk through some of those details that they may not have considered and answer the questions that need to be answered. And then, like I said, I take that up to the Dean of Students Office for approvals, and part of that is risk management, et cetera. And we've had some great success that way.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Chris about his presentation, or anything for that matter?
Josh, if I could just insert, I hope everybody feels just a little bit of an inkling of inspiration today. That's what I was hoping to deliver, some kind of ideas that you can incorporate into your class, make it work, because it's worth it. It makes a big difference for your experience as a professor, and especially for your students in kind of putting the real into the education. So thanks for this opportunity.
Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. We know how to reach out to Chris if we need to, or if something comes later, we've got a question, feel free to do that. Again, thanks to Chris for preparation for this great presentation. And thanks everyone for participating and joining us for this webinar today. Have a great day and great weekend.
Certainly. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.